Welcome to Future Round and Find Out. I'm Dan Blumberg.
I'm Kwaku Anning.
Here, we'll try that again. Welcome to Future Round and Find Out. I'm Dan Blumberg and
I'm Kwaku Anning.
There you go. And we grapple with emerging tech. We try to steer the future in the right direction. We do interviews early in the week on the show. Late in the week, Kwaku and I get together. We kind of digest what that guest talked about. This week we had an interesting one with Stephen Johnson from Notebook LM. We're going to get to what he said about cognitive offloading, cognitive uploading, how to be cognitive in this world of AI. I want to start, though, with something in the news this week that actually didn't get as much attention as I thought it should have. And this is partly because this almost happened last week, and then at the last minute it didn't. And that is the Trump executive order on AI. So very quietly, especially for him, he signed this executive order on Tuesday with really no fanfare. There was supposed to be an event last week with a bunch of AI CEOs and other bigwigs. And then at the very last minute, it got canceled, partly because Silicon Valley folks, David Sachs and others, were lobbying and saying, no, this is going to kill innovation. We're going to lose to China, all this stuff. So he didn't sign the executive order, which would have called for a 90-day period during which the government could review the most frontier AI models for cybersecurity risks in a voluntary program. So he did sign something on Tuesday, which is a 30-day, again, voluntary program. So if you're Anthropic or OpenAI has said they will comply. I think they're all going to comply, even though this is voluntary. They'll share their models, their most advanced models, with the NSA. That's the agency that's going to be in the lead here. Which is interesting. Yeah, there's so much. I know. The NSA is going to be reviewing it for cybersecurity stuff, but also it's like this also has domestic stuff. The NSA really should not be involved with domestic stuff. So again, voluntary review of these most advanced models. This comes out of the Claude Mythos preview and the latest OpenAI models that have shown that they can find, major vulnerabilities in some of the world's most critical software. And so that's sort of what got the Trump administration to reinstate, frankly, what the Biden administration had already done. They had already put in place a voluntary program like this, and Trump rescinded that on day one of his administration, his second administration. That's pretty much the gist of it, right? So it's voluntary, but I think it's a really big deal because usually these programs kind of grow. And, and I also frankly don't know, there are a lot of things with Trump that are like, not really that voluntary, like donating to his ballroom. That I'd really love it if you donated to the ballroom, and it doesn't sound that voluntary. So I don't know, given that these AI companies need to be in government's good graces, I don't know how voluntary it really is, even if technically it is voluntary. And there is a paragraph, nothing in this section shall be construed to authorize the creation of a mandatory government licensing, pre-clearance, or permitting requirement for the development of publication, blah, 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 of AI models, including frontier models. So they literally wrote in the document, this is not mandatory. And it feels a little bit like perhaps they doth protest too much.
Performative, maybe?
Perhaps.
This feels like to me when your intentions conflict with consequences. Talk about future round and finding out, or replacing the word future.
Yeah.
On one hand, all right, we're trying to get that shmoney. You know what I mean? That's a technical term from the East Coast. But us as tech companies, we need to get that money. We want to make sure that there's nothing involved with government regulation that can prevent us from constantly developing the newest, the hottest, the most dynamic, in ways the most authoritarian or the most constrictive, ironically, versions of AI. There's that. So that is your intention. And then the potential consequences of, all right, well, we are going to create these things. One, in addition to the rescinding of this, this thing was already happening. This is stupid. Biden's limiting innovation. So we need to rescind all this. We need to give people their freedom back to make that money, unless it's going to hurt us. And we don't actually fully understand the technology. We being the government, and we also, the technology companies, don't fully understand how people can utilize this. Big ups to Anthropic to, say hey, this is kind of scary, even though we are not bound to restrict ourselves, we're going to come to you first and tell you we've seen what this can do and how it could potentially harm us. We will be trust and safety for the government. The opposing forces here, the contradiction here is astounding. And it feels like in this instance, it feels like this executive order is a perfect example of someone wanting to have their cake and eat it too. And that didn't really work out for the French.
I mean, the executive order comes out of real legitimate concerns. Like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, I think, was saying to the government, like there really are some risks here. It's also, I think, coming at a moment when Trump and others want to cover their asses because anti-data center, because of anti-data center and anti-AI sentiment. We talked about, I've seen even new polls this week that, a majority of people are anti-AI in some way. They're booing graduation speakers. They're protesting the data center. So I think, for the AI companies, they give a little. By the way, it's also very vague, like what exactly is going to happen in these 30 days. So the NSA has 30 days to review a frontier model.
Oh,
it's not totally clear what's going to happen or could happen in those 30 days. I'm not sure, would 90 days have been sufficient? What exactly are they going to do in this period? There's a lot. There's the executive order is, I've read it. It's 2 pages long. And it basically, the order calls for other people to make a bunch of plans. So it's very high level. But I think what's interesting about all this is that even as tepid as the whole thing is, it's voluntary, it's only focused on cybersecurity, it opens the door to other types of review. It opens the door to being mandatory. It opens, it's not just cybersecurity that's an issue. There's, all sorts of, is this model biased? Is it where's the data?
Mm-hmm.
What should be open about it? Can we trust it on a whole variety of vectors, not just could it be used to, crack open Google Chrome or something, or JP Morgan Chase's Vault? Where the AI safety folks hope that this will go, is that there's some sort of FDA type review, right? The FDA reviews a new drug before it's released.
Right.
You can say that process is too slow or onerous or whatever, but generally speaking, they review a new, prescription drug. It has to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all that. That's the process that I think a lot of people want for AI models. And it's and we're about to talk about the ways that we rely on these models in all sorts of ways, the way that we're fusing our thoughts with them, relying on them very heavily.
This was a great topic for you to bring with us.
How are these things built? Can we understand what data is in here? What biases they may have, all that stuff. We've talked about how it's risky to rely on these things too much, and yet they're so powerful. I was having some conversations last night with AI, with the latest Claude model, and it's really, really good.
It's scary good.
It's scary good.
Luckily, the NSA is also monitoring those conversations.
I know. That's the other thing is I'm uploading thoughts to the cloud that I would rather stay local on my device. That's a whole different issue.
I'm in shock. People will look back at this not tens of years or hundreds of years in the future, probably about 6 months to a year, and to be wait a minute, what were we doing? Why did we empower the NSA to look at the most powerful AI models that everyone is dumping all of this info into? Can I do a little aside here?
What is FAFO Friday if not a few asides? Go on.
This is so brilliant, the way you've put these two things together, because this ties together so well with your interview.
I want to talk about one more piece of news that just broke last night, and then let's get to Stephen Johnson, Notebook LM,
Let's go.
Cognitive uploading. This is reporting from NOTUS, NOTUS, News of the United States. And they broke a story last night that the Trump administration and some leaders in AI, including Sam Altman, have discussed various ways that the government might own shares in OpenAI, in Anthropic, in SpaceX, in the AI companies. And it's interesting for a variety of reasons. One, Bernie Sanders published a Times op-ed this week calling for the U.S. government to create a sovereign wealth fund and for it to be based on a one-time 50% tax of the big AI giants, where 50% of their shares are now owned by the public. So like Trump and Bernie Sanders are I don't know if it's 50%, but like they're proposing a similar thing. Steve Bannon also wants this 50% ownership. So there's like weird combination of people who seem to have similar wants here.
Hold on. Do you smell that? That's the shmoney. That's people chasing the shmoney. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's what that smell is. Keep going.
And, if there is to be a jobs apocalypse or whatever, like, taxing the hell out of the AI companies and then redistributing that money to people who have been displaced in whatever ways, like that makes a lot of sense. Also, like you can argue that AI was built on all of our data and we haven't gotten a check yet. So like, even if we don't lose our jobs, like we're still owed something. But anyway, this idea of like the government being an owner of these big AI companies, like a significant owner, is interesting. And I haven't thought enough about like how I feel about it. But one thing that like relates to this executive order is it sets up a big conflict of interest if you are both an owner and a regulator at the same time.
I mean, I believe this current administration does a really excellent job of avoiding conflicts of interest when it comes to personal, private gain. So I'm not worried.
Good. You were betting on this on Polymarket last night, I think.
Well, doesn't the government regulate that as well? So... No, I'm sorry. They profit off of it. See, that's what I'm saying. Separation of church and state. This is how we do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's early, but I think both of these stories are like going to grow. I think there's going to be increasingly more regulation, and it may come with this ownership as these big companies, like look forward to their IPOs. And again, like, maybe this assuages the like anti-data center stuff. I suspect nothing will at this point, but
it feels like, hey, everybody, we want to leverage your genius. And so we're going to invest in the ability to train AI on your genius, on your future thoughts. And part of that will be, we're going to invest in this and we're going to tax the big AI companies. We're going to create this sovereign fund and we're going to have this money waiting for you.
Yep.
And we're betting on the combination of all of your thoughts.
$1,000 or $1,000 a month or whatever the number is.
I think it'd be higher than that.
I would hope it would be higher than that.
I mean, you know what I mean?
This is what Alaska does with the oil, right? Alaska's had a fund like this.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. Alaska, I'm not sure how many years ago, but decades ago, put in place a fund. Norway has this as well. Like, there's so much oil wealth in Alaska and in Norway, like offshore in Norway, that they created a sovereign wealth fund based on some percentage of the oil revenue, and it's distributed to people who live in Norway, people who live in Alaska. If you've seen the Simpsons movie, there's a very funny moment when Homer drives the family to Alaska, and there's like a toll booth, and it's like, "Welcome to Alaska, sir. Like, here's your $1,000." And Homer's like, "It's about time."
Welcome to Alaska. Here's $1,000.
Well, it's about time.
You haven't done a Simpsons reference in a while, so I'm proud of you for sneaking that in.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's like we can pillage and we can like take the oil out of the ground, and then you get some cash for that, and that seems fair, I guess.
I'm sure there are no future implications to that.
No. So anyway, it's I think this government ownership of the AI companies is interesting. I think this is going to keep coming up. I can't believe I'm about to quote Steve Bannon, but I'm going to quote Steve Bannon here, who was quoted in this NOTUS
I'm sorry,
article.
You're going to quote Steve Bannon and Homer Simpson within 5 minutes of each other? I just want to acknowledge that as just like a flex. Go ahead.
Bannon, who, during the campaign, like, there was a weird alignment of like the super MAGA people and the Silicon Valley people, but there was a lot of distaste from Bannon's crew of like anti-tech. Anyway, he says, "You can smell the stench of desperation emanating from the oligarchs as they run heedlessly to a public market takeout. We should not take, quote, tip money, but force them to cough up 50% of the equity to be dispersed to American citizens." Again, this is exactly what Bernie Sanders said.
It's wild.
Yeah, it is.
It's wild. That Venn diagram's coming
I know. You go so far right, you end up left.
Last thing I want to point out here, why is it just currently that all these people want to find ways to give American citizens' money. What could be coming up in the future that could be because there's like the weird fund for if you stormed the Capitol and you were wronged, I'm going to call it reparations, if you will, for people who stormed the Capitol. Why all of a sudden are we trying to pay out Americans? What could be coming up in the future that we'd want people to have a fresh check in the mail to think, maybe I will vote this way? I don't know.
I can't. I can't think of it. Maybe I need a second brain, and then I could think of it. So how many brains do you have?
I think I'm running on 2/3 of a brain, actually. Yeah. I don't. It's
yeah.
I'm on
I'd like one. Thank you. we can go from there when I feel like I have one.
Exactly. I love listening to your interviews. Okay. So I'm gonna Tarantino this conversation a little bit. This interview is so amazing that I know that I will be able to reference Pittsburgh, Miley Cyrus, and Biggie Smalls while we talk about while we talk about AI.
Okay. All right. This. Please. Where do you want to go first?
Here's
Miley,
the thing.
we going Biggie. We going Pittsburgh.
When it hits.
All right. When it hits. So this week we had Steven Johnson on the podcast. Steven Johnson is a well-known writer. He often writes about innovation. He's written the book Where Good Ideas Come From and a variety of other books around innovative technologies. He's written like 14 books. He is the editorial director and became the co-founder of Notebook LM at Google. Notebook LM, if you've used it, is this really interesting product where you can upload all of you can do research in the tool. You can upload different sources. You can say, hey, look at this YouTube video. Hey, look at this article, and then draw connections. It went viral like a year and a half ago when it could make a podcast for you, for me, kind of cringy NPR style podcast where it would take all of your material and like turn it into like two people talking back and forth. But it can do a lot more than that. It can make quizzes. It can make slide decks. It can basically take a lot of information and synthesize it in different ways. And it's really valuable when you have given it a bunch of source material.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Yeah.
Because we don't normally use the terminology, but it is a really great example of a ragbot. A ragbot is an AI assistant that grounds its response in your specific documents, such as PDFs, audio, that sort of thing. Please continue.
No, so you add your sources. AI is really, really good at turning things into other things. So like text into audio into text, audio into like flashcards. You can ask questions. It basically turns a static piece of information like a PDF into something you can ask questions of. And this concept of the notebook, it's become popular enough at Google that it's now rolling out. You're going to see, if you use Google and Gemini, like you're going to see notebooks across a lot of their surfaces now. So it's not just Notebook LM anymore. Like Notebook is like a unit of knowledge that is transferable across Google. The last thing I'll say that's interesting is the notebook format is becoming something interesting in and of itself. Like when you publish a book, you might want to publish a notebook so that I don't want to say readers, but the people who are interested in what you're saying can ask questions of the material. And so notebook as distribution mechanism is also something that they're building. Yeah.
Notebook as distribution methods. Okay.
Yeah.
Woo, man.
But what was really interesting in the conversation was I asked him about the risk of cognitive offloading, something that we've definitely talked about here before, where like you rely too heavily on AI and you don't develop your own thinking enough, and it sort of stunts your thinking. And he says that is a real risk, especially in schools. But the way that he uses it and the way that, you can use it is, and it was interesting because I was watching him like riff in real time. He's like, it's cognitive inputting. No, it's cognitive uploading. Like he has this massive collection of quotes from things he's read over like a couple decades that he's always been sort of a pack rat about like thoughts and ideas. And he's got it all in these notebooks. And so he relies on it. He talked about like a second brain, and it can remember things that he would not be able to remember otherwise. He can ask questions of basically kind of himself in a weird way, like things that he read. It remembers things from his own books that he's written that he's forgotten. He also talks about how a really interesting use for it is once it has all of this source material, you can ask what's missing. You can ask negative questions. Like I've written this thing,
all of this,
and what's missing and that's a type of search query that you couldn't run before with like traditional Google. You could ask it to find stuff, but it would not be able to tell you like, okay, based on this, like what don't I have? And that's a really interesting use of AI. It's something that I do sometimes when I write like a blog post. I'll ask like, what's missing or how might so-and-so interpret this, but I don't have nearly the quote unquote second brain like loaded into AI that Stephen does. I have not, been systematic enough in like putting all my thoughts there. But that is something that a lot of people are doing today, is like making sure that everything that they are thinking or writing or reading is put into an AI so that they can rely on it, again, like a second brain that they can sort of fuse with in interesting ways.
This conversation, I was listening to it this morning. I was like, are we also redefining what intelligence is? Because we've done this for a while. It used to be about who could memorize the most, who could pull up that random quote from Chaucer or from Shakespeare. And that's what, you know what I mean? But use it in context of a conversation or an argument. And that's what it was. And, over time, but especially within the last, I'm going to say 15 years, it's become, well, who can access it? And there was a lot of your talk that felt about accessing information, which is great, which is absolutely great. So what I'd love to do, because I'm gonna formalize this a little bit. We're not we're normally free. We're jazz here. I'm gonna formalize this a little bit here. I'd love to break down our conversation today into a couple of formats. One, the pros of this. Two, the cons. Three, questions. And, overall, what are the implications thinking about this in this way? So, I have a bunch of things that I was thinking about, but I was wondering, as a result of everything that you described and the conversation that you had, like your description, there's a point where it's just like, Dan, stop talking. You're giving him too much. But, the conversation is like almost an hour, and there's so much that he talks about there that's inspiring. It's interesting. From your perspective, what are the pros, and I'm going to call it, of the second brain approach to being creative, to being effective, all of that?
What's funny is when you said pros, I heard PROSE because he's a writer. It has implications.
Look at you.
Yeah, look at that. No, pros and cons. I think the pro, using AI this way, like you can remember more. You can make connections that maybe you wouldn't make, or maybe you wouldn't make them as quickly. That is to me the biggest pro. I think that I know you don't want to get there quite yet, but like the con is like you get lazy. You stop being able to make those connections yourself. But the pro is, you have this sort of incredible recall. The other thing he talked about was it allows him to pursue all of these ideas so quickly.
Yes.
He's writing a book about the American gold rush right now. And he, if he has a thought bubble, like how does this person relate to that person? And AI can go do a bunch of queries. And he was saying, like, back in the day, that he's been writing for a long time, like you would have to go to the library. It might take several weeks to pursue some of these things. That's obviously compressed over time. And so it wouldn't take weeks today, like you'd use Google Scholar or other tools like that. But still, like just the speed with which you can pursue ideas is pretty amazing. And so used well, that can accelerate the birth of new ideas.
On that note, I actually wrote down some notes here. The idea, that last piece, curated notebooks by topic. So we got into this because you were talking about, how did you frame it? The idea of selling notebooks? What was that? The market
just
of notebooks?
That you could create a notebook. And they did. Google has done this. They launched this like a year ago. They made a couple notebooks, one with the complete works of Shakespeare. They just released one this week, actually, with the complete Sherlock Holmes. These, by the way, are both like IP that they can get access to because Shakespeare's been dead a long time. They also partnered with The Economist on like the Economist publishes this annual like World in Data, and that was a very popular one. So you can read The Economist like charts and graphs and articles about the world in data. It's an annual issue that they do. But now there's a notebook element where you can ask questions of the world in data. Like what is the growth of the population in country X? How does it relate to the, changing industry and wherever? So turning what once was static or one-way content into like a two-way thing. And so I think the idea of like, I will create a notebook and I'll be like, hey, Kwaku, I loaded all of these sources into this notebook. It has my thinking on this, this, and this. Maybe there's also a companion blog post, podcast, whatever. Notebook could make those for you. But I might share the actual like knowledge base in a way that I know you're going to then go ask questions of it.
Do you remember a few years ago? This might have been like maybe 5-10 years ago, where there was this whole movement specifically with med schools or hospitals and like doctors programs, bringing in people who didn't study pre-med, like philosophy majors. And there was this whole thing, I think it was like Carnegie Mellon or some institution. They created this pathway for people who weren't biology majors or pre-med majors to get into med school because they wanted to diversify thinking within the medical profession. It feels like this allows for that. And so the idea that I talked about before, where we're investing in people's future thoughts, it is scary, but also interesting as a profession. It's like the brand, like the thought economy or the thinking economy, that there's this fear that it's going to disappear. This is a redefinition of that thinking economy. This is our future around portion here. Yeah. Which I think is really, really interesting. I think that is something that if we could wrap our heads around from a job perspective, that there could be a bit of trickle down pedagogy. And yeah, I'm going really out there. But the idea of like, all right, hey, these are jobs that exist in a way that a YouTuber is a job now. And it's been a job for a while. So now I hear about all these education programs where it's just like, well, we need to train people on how to create a successful YouTube channel. You know, a social media influencer has been a job for a while. There are people like I have a relative, that is their job. They do social media for upcoming TV shows and movies. And when I see them on Instagram and what they post, it is really beautiful and specific. Like they have a specific skill set. So the idea of establishing this within the professional setting will create at least a lane for this type of thinking and teaching this skill set to exist in an education setting. These are all positives. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some negatives coming though, right? Okay. So one of the things, this is why I was so excited that you brought up the NSA thing, because the privacy of content and ideas, but I would even go further, the privacy of your thought process. Your thought process, it is very unique. The way, the way you picked that article, that news piece for us to talk about in conjunction with this interview, I wasn't thinking those terms. I'd heard that same story. It is really, really unique. And the idea of me being like, you know what? I'm going to start the Future Round Better and Find Out podcast. and instead of doing it with Dan, I'm going to do it by myself. But I am going to take my notebook where I plug in all these news articles because I know that Dan thinks this way. And I set it up in a way where I can get your perspective and match it with mine. Mm-hmm. That feels a little dirty to me. I like to think that I have a unique take and you could do the same thing. You know, that to me feels like a negative thing. And the idea of the government being able to do this across a broad swath of the many brilliant people in this country. And I'm not just talking about people who work at companies. It could also be brilliant teachers. It could be like a really brilliant mechanic. It can be like, can you imagine Waymo being able to take this type of thinking and combining it with their cars with the thinking of really amazing New York City cab drivers who understand how traffic patterns work in a way that isn't dependent on Google Maps, but more there's construction here, this normally happens, this street opens when school's let out. You know what I mean? And be able to take all of that and using that to eliminate jobs.
Well, I mean, that analogy is a good one. That's been happening for years. I mean, I remember taking a cab a couple of years ago. This is actually in Peekskill near here, which is a very hilly town and it's kind of weird traffic patterns. Mm-hmm. And the cab driver was using, I think, it probably was an Uber or Lyft. So there was some mapping happening and he ignored it, right? And because he has a brain, because he and I think it's okay to say no to the GPS sometimes. My kids get mad when I no, I'm not doing that. That's stupid, right? I don't need to go down that very quiet, residential street when like the main street is right there, and okay, fine, it takes like 7 seconds longer because there's maybe one red light.
But can I give you a really great example of that? I was visiting my family. We were at the Museum of Natural History. We're going downtown. We're going to my favorite pizza place, and I am giving them a plug because these guys are amazing. Arturo's on West Houston, not the one on the Upper East Side. Amazing pizza. Anyway, so we're going down. It's about 4 p.m, and I'm like, oh, I don't feel like thinking about it. I'm just going to plug it into the GPS. Do you know what? You know where it took us? It took us
played a game of
Times
Snake.
Square.
I'm sure. Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
No, it took us through Times Square to get downtown, which is the most direct route.
Yep.
And maybe there wasn't as much traffic because there are all these people on foot walking through Times Square. That is a perfect example of that. All right. I interrupted your thought. Keep going.
But every time you, as a driver, deviate from whatever Google or whatever mapping service tells you to do, it learns, oh, maybe we should try this next time, right? So like I remember being in that cab with that guy, and like he knew he knew his way around really well. It's not like there's so much traffic in Peekskill, but like he knew which way the hills went up and down, whatever. And he got me to the train station quicker than otherwise. I had just dropped my car off at the mechanic. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. Like, good job. And you just trained the Google map to do this better next time, which is great because we all benefit from Google Maps. Like we all, but as these AI systems, like, and this is why, like I was saying last night, I was having this conversation with Claude, and I'm like sharing things that really I don't love, putting so much personal data or like thinking like up into the cloud and letting it train on that. But that's what I'm doing right now because I'm getting some value from the conversation that I had. But I think the risk is like we're giving away our not even for free. I'm actually paying $20 a month. So we're giving away our thoughts. We're paying, and we're giving away like what's in our brains, our thought process, like, and it trains the next model better in the next model, and so maybe we get it back in the future. But it doesn't make me feel great because I don't know where this is all headed. Maybe this relates back to like why I should own these AI companies. Like, maybe I should own 50% since I'm giving them stuff. I don't know.
Keep in mind though, in what you described, we as people didn't own the company. We were gonna get a little UBI for it, which to me also turns into like 40 acres and a mule or a Cadillac for a blues song. You know what I mean? There's something about that feels predatory.
Yeah. So cognitive uploading, right? Like I think it's a really clever term that Stephen came up with live in the interview, from cognitive offloading, like relying on AI too much and getting lazy. Cognitive uploading, no, like give it everything. Give it everything, because it's going to make such amazing connections. It's going to help you remember. You're going to be the bionic man, right? Like, remember we were at South by, like we were talking about wearing the running suit. It would like make you run faster. You'd like have like a exoskeleton basically. Like, okay, so this is like an exoskeleton for the mind, or it's a second brain or whatever. I can see a lot of value in that. And what does it mean to be human? I guess that's,
okay. We're getting there. I'm going to throw out another con to you. The illusion of understanding concepts becomes commonplace, which actually prevents us from making good decisions. So I should have saved the Times Square analogy for this. So we think because we're dumping all this stuff in here, and then it's giving us something back. I'm going to say the cognitive uploading or offloading or whatever, because we're dumping all this information, we feel like we understand something. Like we feel like we understand Shakespeare because we've gone through this. And so as a result, the understanding, which is driven by the interpretation or the organization of these AI systems, creates this illusion of intelligence, or this illusion of knowing. The idea of like, I know how to use a GPS, so I know how to get around New York City.
Right.
Which caused me to make the bad decision of driving through Times Square at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. Granted, it was in the middle of the pandemic or coming off the end of the pandemic, so there wasn't as much traffic, but it was still insane. What does that look like in other settings? I've entered in all this information about the best way to be a parent, and it's saying that, I need to be...
saying don't vaccinate your child.
Wow. I was going to make a bad analogy about sugar, but mic drop. Go on.
I mean, that actually get back to like government review. Like that might be something you might want to have a government review on. Back to the first Trump administration.
Hey, maybe the NSA can get on that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's a perfect example. There's all this information, but we don't know if the information is right or accurate. It's all being dumped into this notebook. And then it's like, all right, well, my kid is a certain age. There are things that I need to be worried about. I need to make sure that I ask the doctor about. Should I ask him about non-vaccination? Should I ask him about all this vaccination stuff? Well, I'm not even going to get political with it. I'm just going to say, if you don't know where the data is coming from, or if you don't know if the data is actually correct, and that goes into the idea of people buying or this economy of acquiring notebooks from people. Like this person's raised 6 healthy kids. They're going to put out a book on the best way to raise children. And I've bought this book and I'm following, I'm calling it a book, but really it's the notebook. And so I'm asking it questions. Should my kids eat this? Should they swim in raw sewage? You know what I mean? Whatever the case is. And you're following this. And it's like, well, this person's done this, and this is my thinking. Like, this is not that far removed from people saying, well, I vote for this person because I read on Facebook, ... And that's not even getting into who's putting out the notebooks and who do you know if they're actually real, because we don't really vet information anymore. We just react to it if it sounds valid to make ourselves sound intelligent, back to the illusion of understanding concepts, which prevents us from making good decisions or causes us to make bad choices.
The question here is like so if we do rely on AI, whether you call it a second brain or not, whether you upload your own stuff or not, like we're a lot of us are starting to rely on these systems, like how do you know when to deviate? How do you know when to be like, no, that's stupid. I'm not going through Times Square and at 4 o'clock on a Friday. Mm-hmm. How do you call bullshit? I think that's gonna be a really key skill, right? Is like how do you protect that? Because to go with like a different car analogy, like the self-driving car analogy, like when the self-driving car is on like full self-driving mode and it's like really good, but you're still in the driver's seat because it's not 100% there. But 97% of the time it's there. You just get really lazy, right? You get lazy because you trust it, so often, and then it drives into an embankment or whatever.
I think more than lazy, you lose confidence in your own decision-making ability because you don't do it.
Right.
There's the lazy. It's like I was lazy letting it take me through Times Square. But at what point do you feel like I haven't made that decision in a while? I'm just so used to deferring that I don't even know if the decision I will make will be right, because you're not being affirmed by the good version of it or the bad version of it. We aren't training our own models. We're just so busy training someone else's.
Right.
So what I'd love to be able to do is bring this whole thing home with a past, present, or future question. See how I did that?
Uh-huh.
Is this the time?
If not now, when? All right. Kwaku's got a past, present, or future. He's going to tie this whole thing in a bow. We'll be right back. And we're back.
See?
All right, Kwaku, what do you got?
Okay. Past, present, or future, and I think this has been evolving into like trending questions. Is this trending up? Is this trending down? Inverted searches as creativity, as the new creativity.
Okay. Inverted, you mean what's missing?
Yes.
Here's all my thoughts, here's everything, like that ability to be like, hey, yeah, what's missing here? I think that's very powerful. Honestly, I think it's one of the best things that AI can do, especially when it's like late at night or whatever. Like you want some quick feedback. Again, filtering it all through like a bullshit detector of like, no, that this is not useful. Maybe that's easier for you and me because we're a little bit older and we'd like learned these skills before AI. So we have a bit of that like
we're tracking
muscle memory.
But this is what this
but
is.
Yeah,
why
so as I look at my kids, like I don't know.
Inverted searches as creativity. So in the beginning of this episode, we talked about our Tarantino moment for today.
Okay.
All right. What were the three things I said I was going to pull together? Do you remember?
Biggie, Miley, Pittsburgh.
Here we go. Okay. So when hip hop as an art form first began, it involved taking old albums, usually jazz, soul, funk, and remixing them.
Yep.
And aligning it with drum beats to create a new art form of music.
Yep.
And when this happened, people were like, that's not music.
Uh-huh.
Because you're not playing an instrument, right?
Right.
It was almost an inverted search. It's like, because the drums were put in there to get people to move. The jazz or the funk or whatever was put in there to create this melodic thing over which the poetry went. Gil Scott-Heron, he did it live with live musicians. I'm dropping a lot of music stuff here. Now, we moved through that to people being like, no, there's a ton of creativity. Public Enemy, Dr. Dre, these people are recreating what this is. This is a form of creativity, right? In the early 2000s, this gentleman out of Pittsburgh by the name of Greg Gillis. Have you heard of Greg Gillis? Do you know who he is?
No, I don't think so.
He's best known for his stage name, Girl Talk.
Okay.
This guy's a DJ. And this guy became really famous for mixing together two things. So he took this blending thing, this hip hop thing, and he did to the next level. And he took the vocals from Biggie Smalls's Party and Bullshit and added the instrumental and the chorus, the hook, from Miley Cyrus's Party in the USA. And it became a hit. I remember I was at a show on Governor's Island, and I saw this guy perform this, but really he's just playing the version of it. Maybe he's doing a little bit of live DJing. I was like, that's not creativity. He's just taking these two things. But there was a lot of thought that went into it. There was the creativity, finding those two things that seemed like they were polar opposites, putting them together in a way. You have the hip hop piece of Biggie Smalls, and everyone's like, oh, I love that. And then you have the hook that everybody sings along with in this Taylor Swift way. Mm-hmm. Now we have software where you can just type in, I want a song that sounds like music that sounds like this, and this.
Right.
And it will produce it. And in fact, I have musician friends who take songs that they've written and they plug it in there and like, can you do this in more of this style? Is that creativity? Is this the death of creativity or the evolution of it? Me, it feels like it's trending up. It's trending in this way where we have all these data inputs. And so it's not about sitting in a garage or sitting in front of a laptop, which we used to knock. But now it's just about writing a prompt or putting in the search. You've created something. Hey, I've written this song. Can you add something to this that it's really poignant, but I want people to be able to dance to this? Mm-hmm. Is that our new form of creativity? That was really my biggest takeaway in listening to this episode.
Right on. I mean, I think it is a new form of creativity.
And do we want it? Is it the death of the old creativity? Is Girl Talk a musician? Or is he just an early prompter?
I don't know. I mean, if it gets you up and dancing, like, who cares, I guess, right? I guess.
That's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I got for you today.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
That's it.
We have futured. We have found out. Kwaku, you brought us home.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. This is Future Round and Find Out. You should check out the newsletter at futureround.com. You should tell a friend. Not you should. I hope that you will tell a friend about this show because that is how podcasts grow.
Yeah. Can I say this too?
Yeah.
The next time someone is using one of your brilliant points at a dinner party or chatting with their friends, watching their kids playing Little League, that's when you tell your friend. Don't just say that this is your own personal brilliance. Like, oh, I'm smart because I know this guy Dan, and he brings on this chucklehead Kwaku, every once in a while.
Yeah. And that's a wrap.